Hi, I'm David Penn, Research Analyst with the Finovate Group. Thank you for joining us today for our Finovate FinTech Halftime Review presentation. Looking under the hood of today's payments ecosystem, featuring David Keenan, Senior Vice President with Fiserv. Today's discussion looks at the role of safe, fast, convenient payments in the modern economy, the importance of meeting consumers where they are, and how businesses can provide the right options at the right time to create a winning payment experience. Before we get started, a quick reminder that this is an interactive presentation and we welcome your questions. Please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen to send us your question, and we'll take them up toward the end of our program. We've got quite a bit to cover today, so let's get started. David, take it away.
Great. And David, thank you very much. And to all of you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are. Thank you for your time today. I'm eager to present to you some insights driven by data that we have collected here at Fiserv as a major player in the payments ecosystem. And if you'll give me an hour of your time or so, I hope to reward you with some things that maybe you hadn't thought about in a certain way, but ways that you can take out of this some ways to improve your relationships with your own customers. As David said, we have quite a bit to get into, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions, so let's just go ahead and dig right in. As David said, safe, secure payments are the fuel that powers the economy. We're going to talk about a variety of different payment types this afternoon and how they are changing, but the ones I'm going to focus on are, number one, the importance of maintaining safe, secure cash access. That one, of course, may not be as natural for all of you as we're moving to a more electronic environment. Number two, we're going to talk about the move from physical plastics and at point of sale to the embedded payment and the need for digital enablement. And then finally, I'm going to share with you some pretty dramatic data that show the upcoming disruption of existing payment rails by the move to real-time and the implications of that on the entire payments ecosystem. So we're going to dive right in. Let's start with cash. And although it's very boring, this is Fed data that continues to show that cash remains a very preferred payment method in the U.S. Here you can see it's just behind debit. And although cash has been easing, we have not seen in the last 5 years a sort of falling off a cliff of cash. In fact, we see strength in cash payments. For those of you who might be believing that this is just for small ticket items, actually that's not the case. Almost 1 out of 5 transactions done in the United States over $100 are still done in cash. And that's a pretty powerful thing that indicates that cash remains a very preferred way to pay. In fact, if you go through and you survey consumers and you ask them about their cash usage, you will see that the vast majority, 85%, say that during the last 12 months, their use of cash either stayed the same or it increased. So again, this is the qualitative side of what we actually see in the ecosystem, that cash remains a preferred way for people to go and do some of their purchases of goods and services. You might think that, in fact, this is something that is something for the older generation, that the younger generation actually, though, is moving over totally electronic. But actually, as we see here, and this is a cash usage trend slide, this is also Fed data that indicates by age cohort the preference for cash. And as you can see way over on the left, the group that actually is using cash the most is the age group under 25. And if you dig into some more of this, you actually see that this group, as well as the millennial group, is now in their 30s. Actually, they do believe that their cash usage is going to be going up next year as well as this one. So all of this comes around to a way that, for a variety of reasons, and despite the industry's reasonable move to try to move to faster, safer, secure payments, people remain very, very stuck on using cash. We believe that there's actually a couple reasons for this, a push and a pull. The pull reason for that is that the cash economy actually is alive and well. For those of you who might not believe that, just next time you take your car to a mechanic, ask them what their cash price is, and you may be surprised at the answer that you get. On the push side, that we believe that although cash is dirty and sometimes inconvenient, there is a security element, and the survey data support the perception of consumers that actually cash is a very safe way to pay. And when you think about it, in contrast to your own wallet, that may get a little clearer. If you happen to lose your wallet or your purse got stolen, you're most alarmed. You will be troubled by the fact that the $70 in cash that you had in your wallet is now gone, but you're probably more troubled about your identity and the plastics that you had and other items as a way of something that was going to cause you more concern. So again, there's lots of reasons why cash remains a fixture in today's economy. Finally, I want to leave you with, just as I'm going to in a couple other places, actually some real-time data that show the effect of this in our new COVID environment. So this slide, as you can see here, this is 2019 number of cash transactions, as you can see in the first half of the year. And you can see a reasonably steady growth. So this is Fiserv data of our thousands of clients that we process, over 4,000 financial institutions that we do processing for. And so you can see in 2019 this chart of relatively stable cash usage. This actually is the 2020. So here you can clearly see the dip down as COVID went to put people into their homes. But note, as the country has reopened, people desiring to go access cash has popped back up. And we are at the same levels where we were a year ago. So we're now matching, we're right back on track of, in terms of people getting cash, where we were a year ago and before. Interestingly, though, if we now take a look at the amount of cash that is being withdrawn, this is showing the average withdrawal amount. Again, a relatively steady amount that is being withdrawn in the first half of 2019. And before I show you the chart, I'll ask you to each, in your own mind, predict when I show you 2020, what do you think has happened in the face of COVID and social distancing and don't touch and cash being, more of a lot of noise with cashless. Everyone go ahead, take your little guess, take your guess on what you think it will be. Here's the result. So an eye-popping note that at the same time, while there was a dip in withdrawals, what we saw is people start to take out more, not enough to put underneath their mattresses, but an impressive lift on the amount of cash being withdrawn. And note, even as you'll remember on the slide just before, where we saw that transactions have actually gone back up, it is not, cash has not gone back down to historic levels. So actually what we're seeing now is more people getting cash out and keeping cash in circulation. And we've tracked this, but there's no real reason we see that why this would die down. So it's a very interesting thing, again, about even in the COVID area, the demand for cash continues at very, very strong levels. So let's move on now to the second concept, which was on digital enablement. The slide you see in front of you is a model that illustrates what we see happening based on our payment process data. And what this suggests is that card-based spend, the just over $3 trillion in debit and the $4 trillion in credit spend, is very clearly moving away from plastic-based payments. So the blue triangle on the bottom indicates the amount of transactions that are being done where I actually hand you a plastic when I'm making a purchase. It's actually used there. And over time, as you see the model, the number of transactions done on a plastic-based payment are declining, even as technologies like EMV and NFC, tap, contactless, are continuing to make card payments even more secure and fast. And this model is very similar to what we noticed with checks. And in checks, technologies like and innovations like remote deposit capture are continuing to extend out the lifespan of checks. And I'm certainly not suggesting here that plastics are going to go away anytime soon. But what I am suggesting, and the data clearly show, is that the places where actually tokens or representations of the 16-digit number, as indicated on the black part above, those are actually greatly on the rise, and that takes not just the form of things like Apple Pay, but where we're really seeing this growth is in what I would call either set it and forget it type platforms like Uber, where you go through and you set up your card, your token, up in a platform, and then you just come back to it time and time again. We're seeing much, much more of that type of activity, as well as activity just from e-commerce, a phenomenon that clearly was thrust upon us in COVID, where more and more of the economy was moved into a remote or e-commerce based. So we've been tracking this model and how payments, and the takeaway on this one is that you really want to start to be thinking, if you are not already, about, for those of you with card programs, how do you go and help your cardholders get into these platforms, whether it's getting into the places where they want to shop and set it and forget it, whether that's Amazon or Walmart.com, but also in the set it and forget it recurring type environments like Netflix. Our data show that, yes, there's a strong propensity and retention for cardholder preference for those issuers who help them get into these platforms like Netflix, much in the way that historically we saw this effect with bill pay. And as many of you probably know, the way to keep a checking account active was to go and just get it into some form of bill pay. Now we're seeing, and we encourage, the more that you can go and help your cardholders get into these set it and forget it type of embedded environments where the search and shopping happens and then the payment just happens as part of the transaction, then this is a good way for you to stay engaged with your cardholders. Here's an illustration, again, coming back to some very timely thing with COVID. This is the last 12 months. Again, this is Fiserv Card Services data that we're observing of spend. And the blue line at the top indicates the total amount of spend that we've seen out of our portfolio. And there again, you can see a little bit of the rise up to holiday shopping and then the COVID dip and then it's coming back. That is relatively consistent, hanging in the high single digits of growth on that trend line. Look at the bottom of this, where you see that over the last 12 months, the percentage of spend, of that spend that you see above, the percentage of that has doubled in the last 12 months. And that's a very, again, you saw the spike running up during the holiday shopping, and everyone knows more and more shopping is being done that way. But note how COVID has really caused just a jump shift in the amount of people doing activity with tokens as opposed to physical plastics. We believe we're watching this very closely. And again, use it as a foundational thing to encourage all of our clients to go through and make sure that they are helping their cardholders get educated, get trained, get aware, get onto these digital platforms, because this clearly is going to be an increasing part of card volume going forward. The last part that I would like to share with you is actually a little bit of a deeper dive related into the move to real-time payments. And everybody knows and has heard about all of the energy being placed around the move to real-time. But it's helpful. The slide in front of you shows this is Fed data that illustrates the relative sizes of spend non-cash payments volume in the U.S. So let's take a minute and just dive into this. The orange bars on the left, as indicated by the leftmost key, are transactions in billions. So there you can see, for example, 45 billion or so credit transactions. The blue with the key on the right is actually the dollar volume in trillions. So there's the 3 trillion of debit, the 4 trillion of credit, the 90 trillion of ACH and check. Down at the bottom, you can see numbers you're probably familiar with debit, credit, and ACH continuing to take their toll on check, again, taking some out of cash as that is sliding. But you'll note on this that if you do a little math, you come to realize that whereas the large numbers of transactions are done by debit and credit, the dollars being moved in today's ecosystem are still predominantly on ACH and check. So you've got a relatively large number of small ticket items on debit and credit and a lower number of relatively higher ticket items that are being done on ACH and check. And the interesting thing about this, we believe, is that if there was going to be a move to real time, in other words, if there was going to be market forces that would cause us to want to move to real time, it would seem that the places where you would want there would be most value in doing that is in higher ticket areas. So if you look at ACH, if you think about payroll, if you think about rent or those sort of big payments that are being done, those are natural places to go and where we would expect there to be market forces pulling us to real time. Many expert consensus is that of that 90 trillion of ACH and check volumes over on the right, about 1/10 of that, or over $9 trillion in the next 5 years, is going to be moving from ACH and check to some real-time funds exchange. And I want to state that again because it's such a stunning number. $9 trillion of the ACH and check volume in the next 5 years are likely to be moved over to real-time payments. And you'll note that that $9 trillion dwarfs the amount of total debit and credit spend volume. It's a really powerful insight that suggests that there's a big disruption, a big disruptive force coming to go and do this. And to the extent that this goes over and moves over onto whatever winning rails, it's going to change the shape of this. It's going to change the shape of how we all interact with each other in making payments. Just absolutely an eye-opening thing. When you think about it, these experiments, it's a fair question, and for those of you who watch this play out in these market experiments, there's two schools of thought that actually seem to be positioning themselves for winning the 9 trillion of ACH volume that's likely to move over into real time. And it's a fair question to say, you know, we've seen Fed-based and NACHA-based faster funds initiatives on, do we want to go, will ACH, will real-time ACH, will same-day ACH? And when I say this, for those of you who geek out on payments like me, I'm actually talking in terms of real-time auth and real-time clearing of transactions as opposed to real-time settlement of transactions between federally insured financial institutions. But will the market, will the 9 trillion of this move over into ACH, or will it move over onto card rails? And whereas I believe that this battle is going to, and as any good innovation, the market is going to have many experiments out in place, and I think this is going to play out over the next 3 to 5 years, we do have a view that we believe that the winner of the majority of this volume will be card rails. Our arguments for believing that are essentially that card rails have several benefits that make them more likely to win this volume. And let me say right away, for those of you who are looking at your COVID-impacted card interchange budgets, I do not see this volume moving over as classic POS interchange. So when I'm talking here, I'm talking in terms of leveraging the rails that you have built and the investment you've made on that, but I don't believe that these transactions are going to be done as point-of-sale transactions in any way. What I do believe is that card rails have some big advantages over ACH, which does have the incumbent volume, but one, as we all know, these 16-digit PANs are very easy to tokenize, as opposed to no one yet has really figured out a good way to tokenize the routing transit plus account number tokens that ACH and checks use. But PANs are very, very easy to tokenize. The system knows how to do it. Second very powerful way to argument for card rails is that those rails already have the capability to do real-time auth, real-time clearing. Card rails, certainly the debit rails, have been able to do this for 40 years, been able to move transactions in and auth and clear in real time. They were built out of shared ATM networks where you absolutely had to make sure that Dave was good for the money before giving him cash. So the rails have been able to do this for many years. It's just the use cases that have been on those rails have been constrained to point of sale and ATM. The fact that the rails can do it, the fact that the PANs are very easy to tokenize and embed really are some powerful advantages for the card rails in this battle over how this $9 trillion of volume is going to migrate. And I'm looking, the canaries in the coal mine, if you will. I'm looking for a couple things to happen here to sort of indicate. One is, where do the public registries actually set up where public tokens, which I do believe are going to be used in this, so cell phone numbers, email addresses, I do believe that those public tokens, which PayPal demonstrated to us 15 years ago, can readily be used. I believe that the places where registries get set up to allow the translation of either card or real-time ACH platforms, those registries are going to be critical. I also look for use cases that will be developed to expand. A big one, I believe, is as I've indicated before, payroll, and particularly the gig economy. Fair amount of research suggests that in the 2020s there will be a big changes in what we consider normal hiring and non-traditional employer-employee relationship. Gig economy, already 2 out of 5 people are going to be moving over and getting income off the gig economy. So this is a big factor. So don't be surprised one day whether you are already in the gig economy or know someone who is, whether you are someone who receives their electronic deposit of your pay every 2 weeks. I look for a very meaningful thing of how you will start to get that money owed to you delivered to you in a more real-time fashion. And that's one thing that we're tracking and again, believe it's very important for you to get enabled. Let's take a look at just a couple indications of this. And here I'm going to show you, this is Venmo operating their volumes over the last couple years. And then Zelle, as you all know, that the financial institutions have gotten together and they've started to concentrate their focuses and resources on helping consumers go and meet the real time. So here's Zelle over the same time period. And again, I don't know which one of these is ultimately going to win out. I consider this a thriving part of the ecosystem that we are seeing this. Our analysis of both Venmo activity and Zelle activity clearly indicates that it has moved well beyond our classic mindset of that it's just P2P transactions. We are very much seeing that these brands, these payments are being used for a wide variety of applications, up to and including places that you would consider to be traditional point of sale. And I don't want to alarm anyone, but I do want to point out that there are classic businesses that would go and be able to just say, look, when you want to go in and buy some food or get some goods or services, that you could just Venmo or Zelle the money as opposed to using a plastic or a pan or some other method to pay. We're seeing this. It will be very interesting in the post-COVID environment if these experiments play out. But very clearly, there's no restrictions on this other than imagination and democratization of these services. So we fully expect to see these continue on, and you will want to make sure that you are very much engaged in helping your consumers to stay active in these kinds of applications. One final COVID note on, we used to believe that the gig economy, large dollar transactions were going to be the mover of funds to real time, to move away from check and ACH. But I want to just call attention to just this, and this is anecdotal, but those of you who have, the country has, and the world has suffered under the pain of caused by COVID, and there have been many needs. Here's just a couple illustrations of ways where I think the infrastructure, the payments infrastructure, has shown its age in the fact that when these types of payments were needed out to help small businesses, to help consumers, that we didn't have ready ways to pay. Even though, we saw even a fair amount of people still don't have their benefits, fair amount of people, instead of getting checks, are getting prepaid cards. There's to me, a dramatic sign of how much the world needed real-time, faster payments, and I would suggest that that COVID is going to spur an even faster move and migration over to real-time. And the model that I think back on, for those of you who've been in this space a little bit for a while, is about remote deposit capture. And for those of you who remember, remote deposit capture, RDC, was a direct product of the tragedy of 9/11. And it's a longer story about it, but it was actually 9/11 and the failure to get paper checks moved around the country was the spur that got remote deposit capture to now be something that is a thriving part of our ecosystem and the value we provide to consumers. In the same way, I see that COVID, a silver lining in this COVID tragedy, is that no one was fully prepared for this. We never would have probably taken on the experiments that we have been forced to, both in how we do business, how we interact with each other. But COVID has just thrust that upon us. And so I believe that actually COVID now may be the thing that drives this migration of real time to happen even faster. And I think that's a good thing. So I want to get ready to leave plenty of room for questions. So before I go, just want to let you know, thank you again for your interest today in this. Not surprisingly, Fiserv, we put our money where our mouth is. These themes and strategies, we've taken these to heart, and these are some of the solutions that Fiserv has built up around to help you go and meet your consumers where they want to be, to help build optimal winning strategies, whether that's through secure surcharge-free cash access, whether it's through getting physical PANs, physical cards over into the embedded ecosystem, or being able to just move your consumers over into real time. These are some of the Fiserv solutions, and we hope you'll check them out. In addition, we would welcome all of you to want to learn more about Fiserv. For those of you who are our partners today, thank you for letting us earn your trust every day and for growing with us. For those of you who may not be leveraging these solutions or others, here's some resources for you to go and take a look at, and we would very much like to have a conversation with you on these or any other areas that you're looking for as we're moving through these uncharted waters. So with that, David, I think I would like to open up and see if we've gotten any questions.
Absolutely. Let's definitely do that. And before we move to the questions, I just want to let everyone in the audience know there's actually been a couple of questions about being able to see this presentation again, being able to access the slides, all that kind of thing. So I did want to make sure that everyone knew that the presentation will be available on demand this week. You'll be able to access that through the same link that you used to register for the program. If you'd like to go back over some of the points that Dave made, quite a lot of information in there. So you will be able to access it on demand this week. Also, in the weeks to come, the entire presentation will be available on the Finovate blog itself. So if you don't get the opportunity in the near time, the next few days this week for the on-demand reviewing, you will be able to get access to it on the Finovate blog in its entirety as well. As I mentioned, there also were some questions with regard to access to the slides. And there are a couple different ways. If you're interested in getting your hands on those, you can either let us know in the Q&A. Instead of asking a question, you can ask for access to those slides, and Fiserv will be able to get in touch with you that way. Also, there's a survey at the end of the presentation, which we'd like you all to participate in. Let us know how you liked the presentation, any constructive feedback for us, and that's another opportunity that you have to let us know if you'd like to get a copy of the slides from David's presentation. Again, a ton of information, I'm sure, some great statistics that I'm sure people are going to want to take with them. So again, if you want to have access to the slides, let us know either in the Ask a Question box, or you can let us know in the survey that'll be there at the end of the presentation. Also, again, just one last time, if you do have a question, we do have quite a few, so go ahead, use that Ask a Question button to send us your question if you like. I will say that we have quite a few, so if we don't get to your question, our apologies. We're going to get to as many as we can. We've got about 15 or 20 minutes or so to go, so we're going to do what we can to get through those questions. So again, if you have one, please send it to us using the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. So before we get started, let me take a look at one sort of a general. There are a lot of specific questions and some very sort of broad questions about Fiserv more broadly, but I wanted to touch base with a couple of things specifically in your presentation, David, and that I think was the decision to begin the presentation with the insights on cash. Which I thought were very, very fascinating and surprising in many respects. And I'm wondering, was it a deliberate attempt to begin with cash, as we're all talking about digital transformation, to make sure that that point hit home, that is still a very important payment method, not just in general, but for the same young people who are increasingly becoming the consumers of today and tomorrow?
It was. It is a conscious, and we, those of us in electronic payments, tend to want to observe that, you know, there's just this move and everything is going to migrate and it'll all be, you know, taps and clear and real time. The data continues, not our data, Fed data continues to show that cash is persistent. And given the fact that financial institutions enjoy the high ground on providing safe, secure access to cash, my underscore here is just don't give that up while you are looking to find faster, you know, alternate ways to pay. You've already got this high ground. Consumers value it. Just make sure that that is a part of your strategy. Doesn't have to be the dominant strategy, but I think those who tend to neglect it or overlook it or dismiss it are actually just hamstringing themselves based on something that clearly consumers are desiring.
Yeah, I think it's really great, and I really appreciate when folks like yourselves and names like Fiserv come in and really bring this wealth of data, because we see so much of this, for example, in our Finovate demonstration. Some of the companies, often to the surprise of some of our audience members, one of the more popular companies at our last show was about being able to deliver cash to people wherever they were as part of any other sort of transaction. So that persistence of cash is really something it was really interesting to hear you focus on. Let's take a look at, here's one question that came in. Let's see. Is interoperability of different wallets and tokens an important issue for wider adoption?
A terrific question. Thank you for asking that question. It is. I'm going to go back to what I believe is very, very important, which is registries, which are going to act as translators for the PANs and the tokens that are out there. And again, whether this moves to faster ACH or whether real-time moves to card rails, we will have multiple tokens. We will have 19 different tokens that will be managed for us by our devices, by our platforms, and those are whether the interoperability is at the endpoints, that is either the buyer or the seller, the push or the pull, or the interoperability is done by universal translators that are registries that can sit in and, as I noted, can do things with public tokens, emails, cell phones, to those other tokens. Yes, that's a marvelous point, that interoperability is going to be just table stakes for these platforms to take off.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Here's a question. It's a little bit more complex. For large financial transactions, is settlement lag, T+2, a good cool-off for proving details in agreement, or something to be optimized away?
That is a PhD level question. So whoever asked that, thank you very much. And there's a couple things that I take out of that. One of these are, you'll note that I did not include wire in the conversation before, which really is the fastest way to do auth clearing and settlement. I chose from this is more of a retail presentation, so I did take that out. We do see on Fiserv's bill pay, we're the number one player in bill pay, and we see actually to the settlement question that in that use case, actually settlement of funds isn't the critical thing. It's actually being able just to update the GL that says that, yeah, David has paid his electric bill and has good funds coming. So it's not as much in that use case that it's essential that the money be settled as it is that there is good funds from a trusted IOU, if you will. So, do I believe that, my personal belief is that for this $9 trillion, real-time auth, real-time clearing done by trusted counterparties will be sufficient. But clearly there's as wires demonstrate, there's a big market out there where no, there absolutely could be some more disruptive power in real-time settlement. I'll add on to that by something that troubles me greatly, and go back to the little scales that I put. Whether or not we're going with real-time ACH or real-time transactions done via card rails, I'm very concerned about the fraud that is, the potential for fraud that real-time use cases create, where there is no right to pull it back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And we're going to have to deal with that much in the way that back in the 90s, we thought that actually signature debit was going to be disastrous. And it turns out, no, it wasn't, but we learned our way through that. So I believe that whether or not it is ACH or real-time via card rails, as an industry, we're going to have to get much smarter and better about protecting our consumers, either from themselves or from fraudsters, because this concept of real-time is new. It's very powerful. It's going to have a lot of convenience. However, it offers up new avenues for fraud that we just haven't had to face. And so I think that's something that we've got to watch for.
Sure, that makes a tremendous sense. You can readily think of analogs and other aspects of technology where a certain amount of friction was removed and people were allowed to follow their impulses maybe more readily than they were ready to. So that it's definitely conceived that.
Marvelous point.
Yeah, being a challenge. Here's another question. This is sort of an informational question. I know this comes up from time to time. People still getting to understand some of the more recent developments in the payment space. It has to do with the idea of tokenization. And one of the audience members asked the question, can you more clearly define a token, and is there any connection with crypto tokens, they asked.
Thank you for the question. Let me take that in two ways. There's tokens that represent access to a account, a funding source, a funding pool, and then there's actual crypto tokens like Bitcoin that actually contain the store of value within themselves. And for purposes of today's conversation, I was actually talking about tokens that merely represent Dave Keenan out into the ecosystem and have some characteristics around that token. We talked about interoperability before, that we know that the token represents Dave in the ecosystem, but the funding actually stays in the account to be drawn on. The concept of crypto as cash, crypto token that actually is the value, is a very powerful concept. We watch it. I'm dubious about versions 1.0 of crypto value, merely because of the unregulated status of most of those, and some of them who seem to enjoy their unregulated pirate-type status. What will be a turning point for me is when we actually see crypto value, tokens that are actually value, that become endorsed by a government. There's obviously for taxation alone, there's a powerful motivation for governments to want to get into this. A dollar bill, David, that I give to you, doesn't remember anything about who touched it. Obviously, with crypto sources of value, it remembers everybody that touched it, so you've just solved the taxation problem. When I see governments start to endorse and embrace those, that's when I'll really think that crypto value will start to play a meaningful role in the ecosystem. But for now, it's merely just, whether it's a cell phone number or a 16-digit sequence of digits, it's a way for me to represent my funding source to everybody else in the ecosystem.
Excellent, excellent. Let's take a look at this question. Let's see. Here we go. Impact on foreign exchange payments. They use the example of say, travel or international online purchases. Is there optimization potential in tokens instead of central banking approving stores of value?
Again, terrific question. Thank you for that. There are a couple of things. One, on point one, all of these things that I talked about in the trends today could be embraced for intercurrency transactions. So there's nothing in the technology that inherently constrains any of these trends and that I was referencing today. There clearly is, however, government friction that is put in place to whether you're making point of sale purchases, whether you're doing funds transfer, whether you're doing repatriation of funds. There is significant, and I believe for the most part, healthy friction built into inter-currency transactions. Going back to the question before, one of the fascinating advantages of cryptocurrencies is the fact that they play right to that question, and they actually can, as long as they are embraced and endorsed, they actually can operate way more efficiently than whether it's SWIFT or other forms of doing inter-currency funds transfer. And that's going to be, as we move to a more globalized society, I think that's a very interesting thing to watch for.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We're coming up to the end of our presentation. We've got a couple more questions I think we can probably squeeze in. I did want to make sure that I reminded everyone listening that the presentation will be available on demand in the balance of the week. You'll be able to access it using your registration link if you want to go back through that. Also, after that period, it's going to be available on the Finovate blog as well if you don't get the opportunity to take advantage of that on demand this week. Also, if you're interested in a copy of the slides from David's presentation, you can get access to those. You can send us your information via the Ask a Question button. You can let us know that you'd like to get them through there, and Fiserv will get them to you. Or you can go via the survey and let us know that you'd be interested in getting a hold of those slides as well. As we said, a ton of information in there that I'm sure that you'll be able to really leverage into your own insights and further research and understanding as well. So definitely consider taking advantage of both that on-demand offering this week, being on the blog later, and again, letting us know if you'd like to get a copy of those slides. So let's go ahead and just, as we're finishing up, let's see, one question here. Second here, let me scroll up. In terms of industry consolidation, which I thought was an interesting thing to maybe take a broader view, how has that impacted Fiserv's position these days?
Terrific question. Thank you. It's made the world smaller. Our merger with First Data, which was fast followed by two other similar mergers, has brought buyers and sellers closer together. And we believe that is important for two reasons. One is the bringing buyers and sellers closer together leads to more secure, safe payments, whether that's on a local basis or just because the traditional role of network was, neither the buyer or the seller needed to know who the other one was. You trusted the network brand as a way to know that you weren't going to be ripped off. Now that a lot of that has moved to large community platforms like Amazon or Walmart, it's important that that the rest of the world come along with keeping buyers and sellers closer together. It's a way to also move faster payments and do that. So that's one way. The second way that we believe that these have impacted, and we believe there's great synergies, is in the bringing, whether you're a buyer or a seller, we believe managing your money, the one thing everybody wants more of, no one gets tired of it no matter how much they have, managing that scarce resource, not just for payments, but also relationship, cash flow. We believe that bringing financial institutions closer for both payment-related and financial service applications is a critical value add going forward, and we are very, very pleased at how the marketplace has responded to us trying to, bring parties closer, innovate to bring parties closer to their financial institutions, whether that's a cardholder who can now get onto a embedded platform faster, or whether that's a Clover merchant who can now just go and get in better contact with their financial institution when they just have a question. So it has nothing to do with the old point of sale terminal and then my banking was done independently. We see this money management as being a valuable, a critical thing for successful businesses going forward, and we're excited to be able to bring more solutions to bear.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Again, we're running about out of time. We got maybe 4 minutes left, maybe a little less. But I was thinking maybe if we could maybe just as a way of summing up, one of the questions had to do with the sort of the impact of the specifics of this COVID situation on some of the trends that you talked about. If we stay under this particular pandemic situation longer, how might it affect those trends? If the pandemic, if we find a solution, a vaccine sooner, how might it affect those trends? Maybe if you could talk about that perhaps by way of sort of touching on those three main agenda items that you led us with.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for that question. I hope that, and again, we're using data to drive our decisioning. I certainly would have expected, if you had asked me prior to COVID, would COVID put a big dent in cash? I would have said absolutely, because not only are people not going out, but they are also, it's just it's dirty. It has a dirty connotation to it. And yet we see the data. If you look at the data, that is not what's happening. So at least we are looking that demand for cash prior to a vaccine, as long as we're living in this one step at a time back to whatever the new normal is, we believe that cash is going to be an important part. And many of our clients have come to us and talked to us about, hey, how can I get more surcharge-free access to my own cardholders to help them? Digital enablement, I think the eye-popping thing out of that was the fact that remote PAN or token usage has doubled in the last year. I fully look for that to continue on. That one really seems that we've changed the habits, the buying and shopping habits of lots of people, including my mother-in-law, which is always the first mother-in-law test of are we approaching mainstream adoption? And we are. And so I think that one, even post-vaccine, feels like this now has caused us, the way we search and shop, the way we do things is changed. And I think that digital enablement is there. The final one, and quickly just on the move to real time, again, I go back to the 9/11 example. When 9/11 happened, the tragedy there, no one thought, well, okay, guess what? We're going to be having 8 years later, we'll have remote deposit capture. I could completely see that COVID and the infrastructure leakages and failures that have occurred with the ability to get money out and moved, I could fully see government more intervention or the private sector stepping up to make that move to real time even more than the $9 trillion that many experts are calling for. And I think that's again, it's silver lining. I think that it's a very good thing out of a very bad situation.
Right, right. Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for that particular summary in particular. Again, like I said, a lot of material covered, and I think that summary is going to really help sort of tie that down for folks, or at least until they get a chance to check out the on-demand content that's going to be available over the balance of the week. So I want to thank you, David, very much for a fascinating presentation. I know I'm looking forward to going back over these slides myself. I'd like to thank our audience and attendees for joining us for this presentation. Again, apologies if we didn't get to your question, but again, I think we did cover quite a bit of territory, and I do want to thank you for being a part of it. That's all the time we have for today. Again, thank everyone for joining us for our Finovate FinTech Halftime Review presentation. We look forward to being with you again. Have a great day.
Thank you.